So let's go live. All right, it says we're live. Okay, welcome again to Simchat Yeshua Messianic Fellowship. We're having technical delays. Yeah. Hold on while I'm trying to type. Okay. It looks like we got it going. Well, no, it's clocking again. Okay. We are back in on a new one. Let's see if that works. You know, at this point, I don't care if the police come and arrest us. We need to meet face to face. This technology has just never worked well for us. Okay. Good breakfast. Okay, just come on in and say hello. Checking in to see where we're at.
Says, are we up?
Try it, yeah. Try it again. There's a new live stream just a few minutes ago. There we are. Shalom Ruhama. So you said it was exciting to watch as the I assume that meant the rocket launch because, you know, watching us having to restart and then restart again. Oh, somebody has texted, but not from this. Oh, okay. Okay, and then oops. Sorry, I'm trying to do too many things at once. Okay. So, Ruhama is on. So we are working. See how the picture is going. Okay, I'm not seeing any movement on the screen. I yeah, Gail, it is frustrating, and it doesn't look like we're moving. The chat is working, but the audio and video isn't seem to be working. Okay, so it's running now? Okay. Ellen's got the...
I don't know how long ago was this.
Yeah, I don't either. Because we've been going for a little while with this already. I should start counting off the time. This is 12:59 right now. That way you have it, you know, every once in a while, let it be known. That way we can track how far this is delaying.
This is probably 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Oops.
Yeah, the hard part is figuring out just how much that delay is going. But it is moving now, right? It's happening?
Yeah, it's working.
Okay. It's 1 o'clock right now.
It was 12:56 right here.
Oh, okay. So that's 4 minutes. It's not great, but it's functional. Okay. On the premise that this will get better as we go along, let's go ahead and get started with the bulletin because we've been on a big delay already getting started. Okay, so let's look at the bulletin. Today is the 7th of Sivan, or 5780, or May 30, 2020. Today is the 49th day of the Omer. And we had talked about this during the prayer service, that because of the difference between the Sadducee tradition and the Pharisee tradition, it appears that Yeshua, his observation of the dates, found agreement with the Pharisees. With the Sadducees, but the Pharisees had developed their own tradition and their own dates. And so which is why on your traditional Jewish calendars, you probably notice that today, daytime already, is Shavuot. And tonight starts what they call the second day of Shavuot. It appears the more biblical approach is to count from the weekly Sabbath after Passover and start counting from there, whereas the Orthodox tradition, which follows the Pharisee tradition, they go with the first day of Chag Matzot as that Sabbath from which they begin counting. So it's always the 6th of Sivan when their Shavuot occurs. This does not seem to be biblical. It seems to be tradition. So, this is why our date is I think it was last year is the first time I can remember where our counting was exactly the same. It's kind of an interesting how that worked out for this season. So anyways, make a short story long, we will be beginning our celebration of Shavuot. Actually going to be doing it at your home. We still don't have the formal authority to or permission to use our rented space yet. I'm hoping that there's enough enough rebellion going on in all the congregations around that tomorrow, which is the Pentecost Sunday for the churches, that they're going to get. Thank you, Shave, a 3-minute delay. Okay, that they're going to get enough traction going to where the state finally has to relent and allow for congregational services to occur. Which means, God willing, maybe by next Shabbat we can meet in person. May that happen soon and quickly. I do want to keep meeting on Wednesdays online, but at least this way we can get back to normal and work towards everything being normal again. Or even if we have to establish a new sense of normal, at least we can do that. So this is why you have differences in the calendar. This happens frequently because the Orthodox calendar is based on tradition. The Orthodox, that's based on Pharisee tradition, and not necessarily biblical, especially with dates and times like this. Okay, so we have special readings for Shavuot, which is what we're doing today. Again, my apologies. I'm supposed to look at the column on the right and make sure I have the dates lined up properly, but for some reason I sometimes miss that, and so we actually have an off week as far as the regular reading schedule is concerned, and we do the special readings for Shavuot today, which is still good. In a way, we get to do a quick and light discussion of Shavuot here rather than, since we're not going to be able to meet tonight as a congregation, so we get a chance to talk about it anyway. So in a way, this kind of works out this year around. Okay. Again, Wednesday online class for Galatians. We started Galatians 2 last week, and we're going to do 2b or not. Sorry. To be or not to be. Never mind. The second section of Galatians chapter 2. Oops, where am I here? Trying to find where my page shifts over, and it's not doing it. What is going on here? Ah, there we are. Okay. All right. Okay, if you prepared for Nassau this week, then you're set for next week. You just got to, do a little refresher. We had to make a little change in our events. We are, stay at home tonight for Shavuot evening. This begins 24 hours of no regular work. And hopefully, Shalom Kelly, we have, hopefully we have posted the Shavuot, I posted or sent out to post both the handout, which you normally get, and also the lecture notes, so you can see much more of the detail of what goes on, since I'm not going to be able to cover a huge amount of detail about Shavuot. I'll touch on some of the big points. And so that's going to be for tonight. Do it all at home on your own. And then tomorrow at noon, 11 o'clock show up time to set up and organize. We're going to do Shavuot in the park. All right. Yeah, I've heard that. Ruhamai said, okay, a Torah teacher gave a drash that the 3,000 that were filled with the Spirit in Acts 2 was a replacement for the 3,000 killed for the sin of the golden calf. Yeah, there's an interesting point. It's not stated in the scripture, but it's an interesting thought. And it wouldn't be beyond God to make a correlation like that, because the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai is very, very closely related to the giving of the Spirit in Acts chapter 2. So yeah, that's entirely, again, there's no plain statement that says that in the Bible, but nonetheless, it's a good assertion. Okay, so tomorrow at noon at the park, Kelly, we expect you to drive all the way over here just for this. Sorry about that, you can't make it. It's going to be, we normally take the last kiosk or last shelter towards the back of the park where all the trees are. We're going to aim for that because the city is not officially functioning. We weren't able to reserve a spot, and so we're just going to show up and hope it works out. One thing we're going to do differently this year, I just want to make sure we don't make extra trouble for ourselves by gathering. It'd be better for you to pack your own food and to consume your own food at this outing tomorrow. Normally we do a shared meal, and people bring what they want to bring to share with everybody. This year, I think it would be wiser for us to simply bring for yourself. And it's not our normal style, and in a way it's kind of funky, but hey, if we're, they may look past us meeting there, but if it looks like we're having a shared meal, somebody might object. You know how crazy things are in the state right now. So I just want to avoid attracting too much undue attention to ourselves by going ahead and doing this. Okay, so there is a flyer out. It was out some days ago, advertising the get-together tomorrow at the park. So we can make a nice step towards resuming normalcy with our gathering together. Okay. As far as further announcements on our calendar, the entire month of June we have Rosh Chodesh. That's all that's in the entire month for events. And the next month, July, you have another Rosh Chodesh on the 22nd. However, July 9, the Fast of Tammuz, and July 30, Tish B'Av, they're traditional, and I'll be posting stuff on those traditional days and events when we get closer to it. And by the way, in the back of your mind, keep in mind that Bill it was born on Tish B'Av, so we need to say happy birthday to him on Tish B'Av. Okay, anything else in the way of calendar events? Anything else? Questions, comments, rebukes? Or we can go on to our Parsha discussion. Okay. Here we are. Okay. Let me get our thing back up here. Okay. Our Parsha discussion, for some reason, starts off with our prayer service. Actually, I put that in the prayer service. All right, what did I do wrong here? Okay. I need to back up one more chapter. Hopefully it's here. Yes. Okay. Starting at verse 3. This is, I put this in the prayer service specifically because it's the kernel of the contract between God and his people. Okay? Whether you're born into Israel as a Jew or whether you come into Israel as a Gentile, this is the core of the contract. When you're talking about in contract law in California, when you're talking about, what's the key central element of the contract, that, like when you go to an auto dealership and they give you this 80-page thing that you want to sign, they want you to sign on every other page. What's the kernel of the contract is we give them money, they give us car. Okay, that's the kernel. Everything else is details. So the kernel of the contract between God and his people is this, okay, that he's going to give us his laws and we're going to live by them. And in exchange, he will be our God and he will take care of us. That's the kernel of the contract. And if you notice, that kernel is stated over and over and over and over again throughout the entirety of the Bible. Okay? So it's not that God hadn't made it clear. This is the kernel of the contract. This is the basic statement of our relationship. Okay? He will be he will be our God. We will be his people. He will provide for us and we will obey. So, if what you're doing is not belonging to God and obeying, then you're not behaving per contract. Okay? And the contract has provisos for if you don't do that, God has the right to remind us who is God and whose will we are to follow. And so, so when we sin, God is perfectly right and just to remind us that we have sinned. And so, when we are punished for our sin, we can't say God has been unjust to us. We get punished for our sin, and it's not completely uncommon that we get a little bit miffed that we're going through that time, that season, but nonetheless, God is true and we're not. We recognize that. Okay, so you have the presentation of the contract to the leaders of the people of Israel. The leader says, whatever God says, we'll do. Okay. And again, now, California law follows the same idea. For a contract to be enforceable, it has to be presented and it has to be accepted. Okay? So, God gives to Moses the details of the contract. He presents that to the people. The leaders of the people say, whatever God says, we'll do. All right? And that happens several times throughout our Torah, where the people have agreed to follow the ways of God as presented by God. And so you have the kernel of the contract here. Then you also have the legal necessities of the contract. Okay. Now, in California law, there's other details, but these are the basic two main features of what is contract law. It's kind of interesting how even to today, United States law and California law mirrors the same approach. Okay, there's another feature about competent parties, but but in this case, that's not at issue. The leaders of the people to say we will follow whatever God says is they are competent parties to make that statement, make that promise, and of course God is competent party to be God and to provide for the people. But that's actually a minor point compared to the other two. Okay, so God sets the stage. Prepare yourself. In 3 days we'll get together. Don't touch the mountain in any way, shape, or form. This is important in that it establishes holiness. Now, there's many other places in the Bible where God says, do this or don't do this, or this is holy, and don't mess with it, and people don't pay attention to that, and bad things happen to them. Here you don't have any mention of anybody misbehaving with regards to going up on the mountain. So God calls Moses up, and first thing God says is get on down and remind everybody to not come up on the mountain. Let me get to this. Where are we? Chapter 19 of Exodus. I'm sorry, Numbers. Exodus, yeah, Exodus. Sorry, our weekly readings in Numbers, but today we're in Exodus. Okay. Verse 21, Adonai says to Moshe, go down and warn the people not to force their way through to Adonai to see him. If they do, many of them will perish. Even the Kohanim, who have this special privileged relationship, are not allowed to come. And Moses, I gotta connect with this, because this is exactly what I would say. God, what are you talking about? You know better. People are afraid to come up here. You told us not to do that. Of course everybody's going to obey that. But then, God answers in a rather rough fashion. He says, go and get down. I didn't even know they had funky music back then. But, get down and, then come back up. And, oh, by the way, bring Aharon with you. So I think there might have been two real reasons here. But there's a reiteration. Don't let the Kohanim or the people force their way to come up to see him, or else he's going to cause problems. We don't have any record of that happening, so apparently the warning was not so necessary. But nonetheless, Moses thinking, hey, I got this. And God says, no, you don't have this. Make sure everybody knows. And oh, by the way, bring Aaron with you. So, all right. Let me double check. Where am I? Okay. Be sure to type in your questions, comments, or rebukes so I can... actually, you know what? I can do it this way. Move that together a little bit. Now I have a little more room. I can read what's going on here. And watch this too. Okay, chapter 20, we have the statement of the 10 words, 10 commandments. I'll touch on this really quick because this is really a major study on its own. Okay, if you're looking at Strong's, not Strong's, Dr. Stern's Complete Jewish Bible, you'll notice that you have Aleph, Bet, Gimel, the numbering of the commandments, but you notice in verse 2, that's the first commandment is, I am Adonai your God who brought you up out of the land of Egypt, out of the abode of slavery. Okay, in the English counting, that's just the preparatory statement, and the you shall have no other gods before me is the first commandment. Okay. It's not that one is right and one is wrong, although the Hebrew numbering system is definitely older than the Christian numbering system by a long shot. But nonetheless, the most important thing is, remember, this is what God says. So all of it's true and all of it is absolutely critical. From the Jewish point of view, the first thing you need to establish is, to whom are you speaking? Okay? Because there are many things that call themselves God. There are many things that are trying to impress on us the idea that that thing is God, or a God, has power and authority in this world. But here, they ain't none other. Okay, and that's very, very clearly stated. There is no other thing that's called God. Okay, and so the first thing you do is establish who is this God who's speaking to us. And out of all the things that call themselves God in this world, this is I am Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the abode of slavery. That eliminates all the others. There is no other God that I've ever heard that presents itself as if they're the ones, or one, who brought us out of Egypt. Okay? So this is one only God. And this is why this identification is used over and over and over and over again in the Bible. Okay? Because there's no other God that has brought us out of the land of Egypt and brought us out of slavery. So, in the sense of identifying who is this God, who's giving these commandments, that's a very unique and elegant explanation of to whom are we dealing, or with whom we are dealing, I should say. Okay. So, next commandment: you are to have no other gods before me. The rest of it is detail on that basic statement. Okay. Now, in this case, lifnei is used. No other gods before me. In Hebrew, lifnei, which literally means in the face or in your face, or to face. Okay, literally to face. And there's an implication, not just replacing the God who brought us out of Egypt, but there's sort of an implication of conflict, that you are not to have any other gods in conflict with the God who brought us out of the land of Egypt. Okay, to be in conflict with, and everything that calls itself God is in conflict with the one true God who brought us out of Egypt. So so a quick idea is, how do we identify then what is a true God and who is not? Okay, or what makes something a God? And the short answer is, whatever you follow, whatever gives you direction, whatever gives you empowerment to do what it is that thing wants you to do, that is a God to you. Okay, and you think about it, that's an extremely broad statement, but it's very apropos. Back in the pagan days, before we got far more sophisticated, there were things and names and statues and temples and things you did that these other gods wanted you to do and to think about and to talk about. And all that is in opposition in the face of God, the one who brought us out of Egypt. Okay? So understand that. Anything that will present itself as a replacement for what God does for us, to care for us and to provide for us. Okay. Then the rest of it is detail, especially focused. Nowadays, of course, we're more sophisticated. We don't use so much physical statues and physical or God names that we follow and follow those attributes and directions. Not so much directly. However, the bottom line is, what controls you, what directs you, what gives you the impetus to do what you do, that is a God. And now that I should say it can be a God to you. Obviously, if you're studying geology or mathematics, and they give you a particular math problem, and you say, this is how you solve the problem, okay, that's not a God to you, that's instruction. Okay? But if they're, but the idea is whatever guides your life. Now, if you use that, if the teacher uses that math equation to tell you that you should believe everything they tell you, that starts becoming a god. Okay, so the rest of this is details that were far more interesting or far more involved with what was being done in the way of pagan worship in those days, where you had physical statues, you had physical temples, you had physical people, conducting services and stuff and instructions that these things were trying to get you to do. So the commandments that we have are more focused on the religious practice of that day. Mainly, you are to not make yourself carved images, any kind of representation of anything in heaven above, the earth beneath, water below, the shoreline. You are not to bow down to them or serve them. For I, the Adonai your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but displaying grace to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and obey my mitzvot, my commandments. Okay. Issue in question is, how is it that God would hate somebody who was the descendant of someone who hated God? That doesn't sound fair, because we know there's a Torah commandment that you should not put the son to death for the sins of the father. The difficulty is this, in that it's not that God hates the descendants, but the circumstances created by the sins of the parents, the kids have to live through. And I am not at all interested in the concept of a generational curse. It's not that because your parents have sinned or some ancestor of yours sinned that you are stuck, never able to get out from under a curse. The curse that we deal with in our society these days is more the situational societal issues. If you grew up with parents that were drug addicts, it's likely that you're going to look on that and say, oh, that's how I should be when I grow up. And so you follow in that way and you become a drug addict yourself. And, in that sense, yeah, the sins of the parents get visited on the descendants, because that's the society, that's the family draw to continue in those same things. But you can rebel from that. You can rebel from that bad programming and turn yourself to walk with God and in His commandments. In fact, there are very few people in the Messianic movement, or especially in our congregation, that grew up in the ways of the Lord. And if you're teaching your little kids to walk with God, then you have a huge advantage over the kids that grow up until into their teens or as adults. Their parents suddenly shift into this messianic point of view, and the kids are rebelling from that because that's not what they're used to. It's not what they were taught before. Now they're confused, and it takes some time to work through that. So you can have it's not a generational curse, but rather the circumstances brought by the parents induce or promote a sinful mindset or a sinful behavior. Okay. Yafa says, don't say you are a believer, then misbehave in a way to make people claim believers are hypocrites. Okay. Actually, perfect comment, and that's exactly where we're going in verse 7. You are not to use lightly the name of Adonai your God, because Adonai will not leave unpunished someone who uses his name lightly. And this is actually a better translation of the Hebrew. The King's English, to use the name of God in vain. We're not as used to using the word vain in the manner that the King's English used it. Those of us who grew up with that song, "You're So Vain," that's got a whole different. That just means somebody who's highly self-interested. Doesn't really care about so much other people. But in the Hebrew means to take lightly or to use lightly, and it's used in a mercantile setting. Whereas which is more valuable, a bag full of gold that's heavy or a bag full of gold that's light? Okay, or a bag that's light or a bag that's heavy when you're talking about bags of gold. So obviously the heavier is the better. The light is not so important. So taking something lightly is to take it as if it's not important. So if we're to use the name of the Lord in vain, or lightly, as if it has no value, God will deal with that. Now, how do we take the name of the Lord in vain? And Yafah says this perfectly well. Okay, to say that, to misbehave and then to say, or to misbehave and then complain that God is not just, to claim to be a believer but then live in a lifestyle that denies the obedience that comes with that, having a relationship with God. Okay, I think I missed one of your comments here. For the third, you are not to use lightly the name of Adonai. I heard Dennis Prager explain it as do not misrepresent who God is. Oh, absolutely, and that's the other point. When we misbehave, when we take God lightly, we tell everybody around us, don't take God seriously. And that's really the wrong message. And we do that when, and there are wide swaths of people who claim to belong to God and yet spend a lot of their theological time telling people we shouldn't obey God. We shouldn't do what God says. We don't need to. Or even some are even as bold as to say it's wrong and you're sinning if you obey God. Okay. Now, what's the message to the unbeliever when you do that? Okay. What's the message to the unbeliever? Okay. And Gael adds, we look to the government to save us and rescue us when we should be on our knees before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yehovah. Okay, good. Yes, exactly. And matter of fact, I'm picking it up more and more, and not that it wasn't there before, but for some reason this season I'm really seeing it much more clearly. That there's a big political difference in there's one group of people saying power to the people, and then another group of people saying power to the government. Okay, and realistically, who do you want to follow? Who do you want to be rulers over us and our society and in our government? People who want to give us the power, or people who want to use the power for themselves? Think about it. Okay, and I'm hearing this far and far more. It's just becoming much more clear to me. I'm catching it a lot more now than I did before. And you can hear this. You have many tyrants as governors and mayors that are making up rules about how we should behave. And from where we're at, we have a governor saying everybody but churches can gather. And for some reason they're thinking that's okay. And this is where some of us are getting quite prepared to rebel. So with that, let me remind us of the commercial. Yes, I'm going to try to get us back into shul for next Sabbath. There really wasn't enough time to organize it properly for this week. And I still don't have any word from the shul where we rent our space that they will let us in and not freak them out. So this week is my week to push for that, and I will let you know as soon as possible whether or not we can meet at the congregation rather than online. However, I do want to try to have an online service for both the prayer service and for the Parsha discussion. However, that's some technology we still have to work out. This is barely working for us now, as we have it now, and I have everything here. So we'll have to see how we can get this to work out. So keep that in prayer also. All right, other comments coming up. People trusting in masks, hand sanitizer, isolation, and social distancing instead of the promise of Yehovah. Exactly. We're finding out science is now catching up to all the hype that the masks we're wearing aren't very useful. Hand sanitizers can be helpful. A little bit of social distancing can be helpful, but realistically, I think when it's kind of, again, I don't want to get too political, but it's kind of funny that at first the yelling and screaming was, we got to test everybody, and now that we have much more capability to test everybody, suddenly they're saying, no, we don't need to test anybody, because they don't want, the people that are pushing the bad end of this don't want to find out exactly how many people really do have had this virus and aren't a problem with it any longer, because that would bring down the ratio of people not surviving the virus down to minuscule amounts, and that doesn't work for the political ramifications. So, anyways, and then Yafa, I believe we could put our trust in Hashem and still use wisdom to take precautions to protect our loved ones. It is not one or the other. Absolutely. In our modern political environment, it's often identified as one or the other. But yeah, you're right. We need to use wisdom. And as it was known at the beginning, it seemed like using a mask was the right thing. Now the scientists, the real scientists, are saying that the virus is so small it goes right through the masks that we're being told to use. So what's the difference? What's the benefit? Other than the fact that I'm having to deal with a lot of extra carbon dioxide by inhaling my old air inhaling my old air when I exhale just before. So, okay, verse 8, fourth commandment. Remember the day, Shabbat, to set it apart for God. 6 days, you have 6 days to labor and do all your work. The seventh day is a Shabbat for Adonai your God. On it you are to you are not to do any kind of work. My mind just keeps going back to King's English. Sorry about that. Okay, and then there's a lot of other details. Okay, nobody in your family, not even your servants, not even your animals, And then we have a reason for this. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth, the sea and everything in them. But on the seventh day he rested. This is why Adonai blessed the day, Shabbat, and separated it for himself. So, what is the meaning then for keeping the Shabbat? The purpose of keeping the Shabbat, not to mention the physical and psychological benefits. For some reason, obeying God has some great benefits to it. But rather, it's also a testimony, and that's the given reason. It's a statement. When we keep the Sabbath, we make the statement that God is real and God needs to be taken seriously, and that God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days and rested on the seventh. Okay? So we make these statements when we keep the Sabbath. This is why there's always so much effort to prevent us from keeping the Sabbath. That's why so many things always happen on Sabbath. And we have to be, sometimes we have to be in this world but not of it. And sometimes we have to take a position that, what I'd really love to do, I'm not going to do because it's Sabbath. And I want to keep that holy. Okay? And even if people around you don't like it, Okay. Okay, we literally only have 1 more month left in quarantine. And you can survive until then? Maybe. However, remember, we were told initially this was a 2-week quarantine. Okay? And at the bloom side of this whole thing, maybe that made sense. But now that we're past that initial bloom, now it's back to, what they call herd immunity, where it's already spread around enough. We're not going to get big surges like we did at the very beginning. Okay. So now that you mentioned something, the next one, honor your father and mother, so that you may live long in the land which the Lord your God is giving you. Okay. Honor your father and mother that you may live long. Okay, this is Shaul pointed this out. This is the first commandment with a blessing. Okay, it's assumed that everything good's going to happen to you because you obey God, but this one specifically states it. Okay, that you may live long, and so and it's happened before where I've warned my kids that you need to do that so that you will live. Okay, live long. So here's the thing. Let's see. Ruhama. Yeah, Ruhama. I just want to get back together again. It's not the same. And if hand sanitizers and masks make it easier for us to get together, absolutely. If that's the hoop we got to jump through, it's better than not meeting because we don't think it's necessary. Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. Okay, honor your father and mother. Okay, that you may live long in the land. Okay, as we get into Devarim, Deuteronomy, we'll see this over and over and over again. There's a promise with keeping the commandments. What is the promise of keeping the commandments? That you will prosper and you will live well in the land. God will prosper you and he will give you long life and a joyful life and a fulfilled life in the land. Okay, what is the punishment of not following God's commands? He's not going to give the rain. In fact, we read it every week for this reason. Okay, if we don't obey God, he's not going to give the rain. Things won't grow. You're not going to have food. You're going to be poor. You're going to be weak. You're going to be few in number, and other people will take over your land and throw you out. Okay, so the connection here, living long in the land, and living long in the land, has to do with obeying God. So what is that? How is that connected to honoring your father and your mother? There is an assumption here. Okay? It's an unstated assumption that mother and father are going to be teaching you kids how to live rightfully and properly, loving God and obeying his commandments. Okay, there's an assumption here. So for the promise to work, mother and father need to be teaching Torah to the kids. Okay? So kids, get after your folks. If they're not teaching Torah, bug them about it. Ask them to do it. Okay? Because it's their responsibility to teach you in God's ways. We can help. All the rest of us can help. But it's mom and dad that are responsible to teach Torah to the kids. Because you want to have that blessing of living long in the land. By extension, you can open that up a phrase a little bit more like having a long and prosperous life, living where God has planted you to live, in the circumstances. And so, the specific commandment is living in the land. However, not all of us get to live in the land. So even if we're outside the land, God will bless us if we honor our father and mother to do that which God commands. So. That's a commandment and a commandment there, parents. Okay? Not just to honor your father and mother, but also be the person that your kids can honor. Okay? Lead by example, lead by kindness and loving kindness, lead by teaching Torah at every opportunity. Okay? Till your kids get sick and tired of hearing about it, and then keep going. Okay. Barbara asked about wanting to get together, and Gail says again, tomorrow at noon at Cameron Park. I thought this is kind of fuzzy, so I thought we said bring a bug. No, bring a hug and smile for everyone. Okay, also bring your own food. Just to remind you,
Cheers.
And your own. That's right, your own chairs. If we can get the spot we normally get, there's lots of shade. You don't necessarily need covers and easy ups and stuff like that. We seem to do rather well with the shade that we can get, if we can get that spot. Okay. So let's move on. The next commandment, do not murder. Now, King's English says do not kill. And that's been the basis of many well-intentioned but misdirected actions. There are groups of Christians who won't participate in the military, or if they do, they specifically request non-frontline combat positions because they read "do not kill" as meaning don't take another life. Now, what's the difference between murder and killing? Okay, killing is the authorized taking of a life. So, and we see this even in the Bible. If all the children of Israel from 20 years and over were to count as the army, there were no conscientious objectors as a class of people who were let off of that duty to fight when God or the king says we go and fight. Okay, does that mean that you're responsible for the killing that you do? No, that falls on the head of the one who ordered it. It's not your responsibility. It's not your doing. In fact, one of the best things we can do for our veterans, by the way, is to take the opportunity, when you get to talk to a veteran, and tell them the things they did, whether they directly participated or assisted those, or in somewhere along the chain of activity that they believe they participated in the killing of other people. It's not their fault. It's not their doing. They are forgiven. Actually, there never was a sin there for them to be forgiven, but they can forgive themselves because they did not sin by obeying what the government told them to do. They did not sin. And we need to remind our veterans they did not sin. Okay. So killing is different. The soul that sorry, not the soul that sins. That's God's action. We have the murderer shall die, the adulterer shall die, the one who chases after false gods, they shall die. God commands us to deal with those people. Okay, and even if our society doesn't permit us to be that proactive, our society is reserved for its own leadership to handle those things, and some of them they've decided aren't worth being holy over, which is not a good thing, but it's part of the stress of where we are living in our modern times. So understand, murder and killing are two different things. So it's not murder to take the life of a murderer. It's not murder to take the life of an adulterer. It's not murder to take the life of a worshiper of false gods. Now, society might label some of those as murderer, but God does not. Okay. The next commandment: do not commit adultery. Okay. Adultery simply is sexual relations outside of marriage. That's the most exact translation. However, it's also broader than that. There are other qualifications of sexual activity that are worth a death penalty without the specific description of a husband or a wife going after a different person for a mate. Okay, so, and that also has a penalty that's very rough. God is very specific that these things should never happen. Okay, next one, do not steal. Okay, stealing is taking that which does not belong to you. I like to put lying also in the same category of not stealing, because when you lie, you steal the truth from somebody, and you steal the reputation of people if you're lying about their reputation. Okay, don't take what doesn't belong to you. If you're crediting yourself something that someone else did, You're stealing from their reputation. Okay? So don't take what belongs to someone else. Next, do not give false evidence against your neighbor. This is often used in a more general context, simply about not lying under oath. The phrase not making false evidence against your neighbor is actually specific to two circumstances that we run into. One is accusing somebody of defaming the name of God, and the other is in the circumstance of declaring that somebody moved the property boundaries of the land that God is giving Israel. Under those two circumstances, you can be killed as a punishment. And the phrase here about giving false evidence against your neighbor is used. And so that would be the most specific reference that this is talking about. Lying about your neighbor or about somebody else, can also go back to the commandment to do not steal. But nonetheless, here the specific commandment is to not give false evidence against your neighbor. And not to gather to lie about your neighbor to get them killed. Okay, the last one, do not covet your neighbor's house, your neighbor's wife, male or female servants, his donkey, his car, his investment portfolio, whatever. Now, I've had to struggle with this over the years because, to me, the word covet, I was wanting to think and saying that the word covet there has to do with wanting something so much that you're going to do something illegal or improper or fattening to get something that belongs to somebody else. Okay, and I tried to make that description work over the years, and I've had to slowly come to the realization it really doesn't say that so specifically. The word covet there simply means to strongly desire. Okay, it's not a bad idea to include the thought that you want something so badly that you're willing to do something that's not right in order to get what you want. It's wrong for you to strongly desire something that doesn't belong to you. And that's a more general statement, and that's actually more accurate. So let's just go with that. Okay. Okay. Let's go on with, again, when the people heard this, and this, by the way, is extremely crucial. What happened after God was done speaking? They heard the sound of the shofar, the mountain smoking. The people were shaking in fear. And so, standing at a distance, they said to Moshe, "You speak with us, and we will listen, but don't let God speak with us, or we will die." Okay. This is a central feature of the relationship between God and Israel. And it's this statement that sets the relationship between God and his people. Immediately after they said, everything that God says we'll do, then he says, but don't let God speak to us or we will die. In other words, we say we're going to do what he says, but we just don't want to be close because we're afraid he's going to smack us. Okay? And that conditions the relationship with God from this point forward. And by the time when we get into Devarim and Moses is recounting the details of what has gone on for the previous 40 years, he harkens back to this moment when he says, you guys don't have the heart to follow God. Over in Devarim, he says this. You guys don't have the heart to follow God. It goes back to this comment right here. Okay, don't let God speak to us because we're afraid we're going to die. Okay, now if you love someone, even if you know you've misbehaved, and you know somebody loves you, are you more inclined to still be close to them, or are you going to shrink back only shrink back in fear, only in fear? Okay. No, because you're going to trust the relationship's going to work out. Okay. Even if you have to deal with misbehaving, you know, you're going to trust the relationship's going to work out. And remember, these people are coming into this with a freshness, with a newness. They've only been not even 2 months out from being slaves under the thumb of Egypt. So there's still a lot of unlearning and relearning to go, a ton of it. Okay. But these people nonetheless took the impression that, we don't want to be like the Egyptians and everybody else that's been standing against us. Okay. So they stood at a distance. Okay. And then you have, so Moshe comes back to Adonai, and Adonai says, say to the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I spoke when from heaven. Do not make with me gods of silver, nor are you to make gods of gold for yourselves. For me you need to make only an altar of earth. On it you will sacrifice your burnt. This is really cool. What does God need from us? What of our talent and intellect and capability and wonderfulness, in my case, great handsomeness and, suave, you know what I mean. You can suddenly everybody's leaving. What does God need from us? Nothing. Make a pile of dirt for your altar. That's all you need. And then later on he adds, just immediately after that, adds, okay, if you're going to use stones, don't work the stones. Keep them natural. Exactly the way you find them. Don't change them. If you change them, you've altered it. Then now you're adding your workmanship to what you use to worship God. So forget all that. So what does this tell us? God loves us, but he doesn't need our talent and ability. He wants us to use our talent and ability, but he doesn't need it. And so when we put our talent and ability into worshiping God, it's an act of gratitude, but it's not for us to be prideful and say, hey, I'm the one doing this. I'm the one doing that. I cut the stone for the altar. Isn't it beautiful? Thank me, thank me. No. God says, don't put any of your pride in the relationship. Okay. Questions, comments, rebukes in our Torah portion. I know that was a long read. Okay, let's see. Trying to read this someplace where I can actually focus. What is the punishment for the news media that give false evidence about most things, or only giving one side of a story? I'm not supposed to agree with you on that because, well, you know what? Recent court cases come down. It's okay for religious leaders to have political commentary. So, especially with regards to what's right and what's not right. Okay, what is the punishment for a lie? For publishing and continuing a lie, especially defaming people who are good. Okay? Not that we have to be the ones to make that happen, but we can stand back and watch the judgment of God and point out the judgment of God when it happens. Okay. Let's move on to our Haftarah section. All right, what happened here? Second, let me move this over, see if I can. Oh, okay. They did it to me again. Okay, so I need to see, that was what, Ezekiel chapter 1. Okay, our Haftarah. Oops. Get this back here. And that back there. Okay. So we're starting around verse 12, right? Sorry, verse 10. No, it was... Where was I? Ezekiel 1:1. That's what I thought. For some reason, I had the wrong thing going. So I having to use my memory. Okay, so we have this vision. I have an interesting vision of living beings that are not the least bit human, or they had faces. There's something I read this year. It kind of was in the back of my head before, but this is the first time it really came forward. Is these creatures had human faces on four sides, or it had faces on four sides, and it moved, left, right, backward, forward, kind of at right angles, with one face moving forward or another. Kind of interesting. So I don't know why, but this time around that really struck me as unique. Okay, so what Yechezkel is saying now. Let me back up again. Ezekiel, Yechezkel. Okay, to whom was he a prophet and when? Okay, remember our mnemonics. The television show about the talking horse, Mr. Ed. Ed, E.D., Ezekiel, Daniel. So think about Mr. Ed. E.D., Ezekiel, Daniel. So Ezekiel was a prophet during the time of the exile after Babylon took Jerusalem. Okay, and so that's the time. And so the prophecy eventually looks back to a restoration. Ezekiel's work eventually looks to a restoration of Israel back to their land. Okay, back to our land. Okay. And so we have this fantastic picture of the throne room of God and these four creatures. The point I want to get to is let's see, here we go, verse 22. Okay, good discussion, guys. Okay, George added in, breaking the 10th commandment can cause you to break all the others. Absolutely, all the other 9. Take every thought captive. Yes, not Coptic, captive. Very good. Okay, verse 22 in Yechezkel. Okay, this is very important because it figures into what happens in Acts chapter 2. Over the heads of the living creatures was what appeared to be a dome glittering like ice. It was awesome, spread out over their heads. Above them, under the dome, each had a pair of wings spread out straight toward those of others. Each had a pair which covered his body. I heard the sound of their wings as they moved, and it was the sound of rushing water, like the voice of Shaddai, like the noise of a tumultuous crowd or army. When they stopped, they lowered their wings. Whenever there was a sound from above the dome over their heads, they stopped and lowered their wings. Above the dome was over their heads was something like a throne that looked like a sapphire. On it, above it, was what appeared to be a person. I saw what looked like gleaming, amber-colored fire, radiating from what appeared to be his waist upward. Downward from what appeared to be his waist, I saw what looked to be like fire, giving a brilliant light all around. This brilliance around him looked like a rainbow in a cloud on a rainy day. This was how the appearance of the glory of Adonai looked. When I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard the voice of someone speaking. Now, this is wonderful, okay? So you heard the voice of someone. This is a fantastic picture of the throne room of God. And you have a picture that's alternately defined as Ancient of Days or God Almighty. So here is this character from his throne room. Now, I heard the voice of someone speaking. Obviously, we don't have chapters and verses in the original text. So what did he say? Well, let's take a look And what did he say? He said to me, "Human being, stand up. I want to speak with you. As we spoke with me, a spirit entered." Okay, that's nice, but I'm sending you to the people of Israel. This is nice, but this is what's interesting, is what you have in the traditional readings, which we did this morning, is that picture of this picture of God, and he speaks, and then the reading immediately jumps to chapter 3, verse 12, and that's up on the screen right now. "A spirit lifted me up, and I heard behind me a very loud sound. Blessed be the glory of Adonai from his place. It was the sound of the wings of the living creatures as they beat against each other, and the sounds of the wheels next to them, a very loud sound. So a spirit lifted me up and took me away." Oops, sorry, that's as far as it went. Okay, verse 12. Yeah, that's right, it's verse 12 by itself. "Blessed be the glory of Adonai from his place." Okay, so we have this description of the glory of God in our traditional reading, and then it immediately goes to the statement, "Blessed be the glory of Adonai from his place." Okay. Now, when we get to Acts chapter 2, what happened? This is the very thing that was being read in the temple. What was happening, first thing in the morning, you had the parade of the farmers bringing their first fruits to the temple. Okay, and the farmers, all the local farmers would be bringing what they can bring for their first fruits presentation before God. And they would go into the temple court, deliver their first fruits, and there was a routine where they basically say, "I was an Aramean ready to perish, but God brought me to my own land and gave me all this good stuff, and I'm giving back to you a portion, God, a portion of what you gave to me as a thank you and an acknowledgement that you have kept your promise to put me in the land and to prosper me." Okay, all this happens early in the morning, and these farmers would come in, and then there was a second section in the temple area that was set aside for reading of the Word of God. And believe it or not, this was the same thing being read in the temple during this time. Okay, so you would have this picture of the presence of Almighty God, and then the statement, blessed is he from his place. And then boom, it happened. Acts chapter 2, where the Spirit of God descended on the people that were there. Okay, this is why so many people became believers immediately. Okay, it wasn't you can't fit enough people in the temple grounds for 2,000 people to hear and respond. But if this whole incident of speaking in languages they didn't know, being heard by people who did know the language, saying, "We have heard wonderful things being told about us, about what God has done," how's that going to affect people? It's going to wake them up, right? Okay. All right. So this is the moment, okay? And so there's a couple of clues in the text. We're talking about being in his place, and we know from Acts chapter 2 what happened. The Spirit of God came. The Spirit went amongst the people, and the people glorified God through the utterance of what the Spirit gave them in languages that other people could understand. Okay, there's no statement, there's no comment as to whether or not the people saying it had any idea what they're saying, but it was heard and understood by other people. Okay, so that's a fabulous miracle, and that started everything from that point. And this, by the way, is done, according to tradition, the same day as Shavuot. The Shavuot day, the tradition of the giving of the commandments of God on Mount Sinai. Now we have the giving of the Spirit which empowers us to live the commandments of God. Okay, that's the connection. Okay. Anything else on that? Let's see. We were in John 1. Oops, where'd I go? John 1, 32 to 34. Wait, where am I? Well, that's right. Okay, John 1, 32 to 34. Okay, pretty short thing, but this kind of sets the stage. Then Yochanan gave his testimony. I saw the Spirit coming down from heaven like a dove and remaining on him. I myself did not know who he was, but the one who sent me to immerse in water said to me, the one on whom you see the Spirit descending and remaining, this is the one who immerses in the Ruach HaKodesh, and I have seen and borne witness that this is the Son of God. So we have the Besarat Yochanan, the Gospel of John, the Good News of John, that John the Baptist recognizes who Yeshua is. Okay, and so so we have the Spirit. There's another statement of the Spirit descending on somebody. In this case, it was the Spirit coming and descending on and remaining on Yeshua. Okay, and then the last segment is in, where am I again? Matthew 3, verses 11 to 17. There we are. Which is basically the same. But when Yochanan saw many of the Prushim and the Tzaddikim coming to be immersed by him, he said to them, you snakes, who warned you to escape the coming punishment? If you have really turned from your sins to God, produce fruits that will prove it. Okay. And don't suppose you can comfort yourselves by saying, Abraham is our father, for I tell you that God is to raise up for Abraham sons from these stones. Already the axe is at the root of the trees, ready to strike every tree that doesn't produce good fruit, will be chopped down and thrown in fire. It's true that I am immersing you in water so that you might turn from your sin to God, but the one coming after me is more powerful than I. I'm not even to carry his sandals. He will immerse you in the Ruach HaKodesh and in fire. Okay, let me back up here. Okay. Yochanan saw the many Prushim and Tzaddikim coming. This would have been normal. Either they're coming out of simple curiosity or they were sent by the Sanhedrin to come and observe. This is the first stage of determining if somebody would truly be Messiah, as they would send someone out to watch and observe. Then they'd go back and report. Then they would send other people going out to ask questions and to see if the person truly can qualify as Messiah. And then they would come back and report, and then the Sanhedrin would decide whether or not he truly is Messiah. Okay, so this is the beginning of the process, the investigation as to whether or not the Sanhedrin would agree that Yeshua is indeed Messiah. Okay, so John starts off with a really welcoming, open statement. You snakes, who warned you to escape how to escape the coming punishment? Okay. So he starts off with a warning, and these are immensely self-righteous people. The Pharisees are very much like modern Orthodox. They have tons of rules that they themselves they only follow, and they do it for the sake of being more holy than anybody else. And so there's a lot of spiritual pride that goes on with being Orthodox because of that. Okay, but rather, turn from your sins and produce fruit, that is, show the results that prove you have repented. And this is a cute additional line, and this catches them right in the middle of this attitude. And don't suppose you can comfort yourselves by saying, Abraham is our father. For I tell you that God can raise up for Abraham sons from these stones. Okay. This is true in Orthodox today. It's commonly understood that the only value of a Gentile in the world is to provide fodder for the hellfire. In other words, from an Orthodox point of view, there's absolutely nothing beneficial or good from a Gentile. Okay, the Pharisees had that same attitude about fellow Israelites. The Pharisees thought themselves very much superior because of their traditions to anybody else, and there was even they use the phrase that's often and commonly used by Pharisees to talk about the rest of Israel. They call them Am Ha'aretz, the people of the land. Okay, which a not polite reference to someone we would call a country bumpkin. Someone who is ignorant and untrained and incapable of proper observance of proper tradition. And so these are the people that the Pharisees love to look down on. Okay. And so it says, don't think you can say that Abraham is our father. Yeshua even had the same statement to them. Don't think that you can attach yourself to Abraham and gain any kind of benefit from that. That God will take. God can take in our text here, but in reality, what he did do is he did take people that the Pharisees called completely unworthy and make them the sons of Abraham. Okay. And then Yeshua adds another. This is a doublet, repeating the same thing twice but with different words. Great Hebrew poetry. It says, "Already the axe is at the root of the tree, ready to strike every tree that doesn't produce good fruit." Okay. Now he went and said this again in another later on in John. He says, "I am the vine, you are the branches, and those that abide in him will prosper. And if you don't abide, what's going to happen? You're going to be taken off and burned." Okay, burned in the fire. So it's the same concept here. Okay, produce the activities that show you have repented. Okay, this is so very important to us, and this is why we need to think it's important to tell others. It's what you do that counts. It's not just your heart. We've been sold a cop-out to say, "Oh well, it's your intentions that count." No, it's your actions that count, because your actions show your heart. If you fail to do that which is right, then that's your intention. Okay. If you're fearful, upon whom do you trust? Okay. The people who are going to hate us no matter what we do, or you're going to trust God to make it all work out because you have been strong to show strong for him. Okay. So it's what you do that shows. Now, a reverse argument, not a reverse argument, but a counter argument. People say, "Oh, you're trying to earn your way through your good works." No, that's entirely wrong. We are showing by our works that God is real and God needs to be taken seriously. We don't prove to ourselves or to others that we're better than anybody else, or that we're saved and you're not. What we're saying is God is real. God needs to be taken seriously. And if that offends people, that's not your problem. That's not my fault if people get upset. It's not your fault that people get upset because you're doing the right thing. Okay? It's not your issue, because to whom must they answer if they're upset with you for keeping the commandments of God? They have to answer to God, not to us. Okay? He's our king. He's our God. He's the one that answers for us. So don't be afraid to do that which is right. Okay? Okay, and then finish off. He has verse 12 in Matthew 3. He has with him his winnowing fork. He will clear out his threshing floor, gather the wheat into the barn, but burning up the straw with unquenchable fire. Okay, this is an argument in favor of eternal punishment. Some people think it's immensely mean and cruel to say there's going to be an eternal punishment for those who turn away from God. this is a suggestion that, yes, there is. Okay. Okay. That's it for our Parsha for the week. I'm sorry that went on long, but these are two big sections altogether. So, questions, comments, rebukes. Okay, it'll take a minute or so for you to write up. Thank you, by the way, for continuing your discussion while I'm doing my thing, because I can touch on what you're doing. Okay. Let's see, Gail. There's been a huge increase of doves in our neighborhood since I have been under lockdown. I wonder if that is a sign that the Holy Spirit is watching over us. It could be. Could be a sign that's putting seeds out in their backyard, but yeah, it could be. Especially if that's a message that God is giving you from seeing all this. And if you think about it, there's nothing like a little bit of persecution to make God's people stand up and act as they should. Oh, shalom, Elsa. I didn't see you. Oh, there you are. Okay, sorry, my eyes went right past you. There's nothing but a little bit of persecution that makes God's people wake up and decide it's time to seriously stand up and do something that's right, rather than letting the evildoers roll over you all the time. And I think what we've gone through is, just enough to wake up a lot of people. And so I'm really looking forward to see how this all plays out. And again, when it comes to voting, I don't necessarily need to point to one person or another to say these are the people we need to vote for. You will see them well enough. If they are for themselves or for big government or for things that are against God, those are not the people you want to vote for. But the ones that are for the people, for our welfare and benefit, and not necessarily because of government programs, but because we, the people, are truly in charge. And people who are willing to govern for our benefit, with us getting the benefit rather than big government getting more power over us. Those are the people we need to vote for. So pay attention. And then, and just keep praying, because there's a lot of evil stuff afoot. There's a lot of effort to wreck the fairness of our elections. And we simply need to really, really pray that God will give us, the revival that we need, our political revival, our economic revival, and our spiritual revival. Okay. Any questions, comments, rebukes? Okay, let's hang in for a minute or two. I know it was a 3-minute delay when we started. It seems that the delay gets a little bit shorter as we go through this, but don't know for sure how long I have to wait for you all to respond to what I said.
Said it was 6.
6 minutes? Ow. Okay, I'll vamp here for 6 minutes. Hold on a second. 6 minutes, yeah. Okay, as long as it's still going, that's not great, but we got through this. Okay, as long as I'm waiting, let me add this. Again, my YouTube thing. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you find out from us when things go live. Also, keep checking the Facebook page and the website for things being posted, the lecture notes, the handouts, and all that kind of stuff, the bulletins, and so on, so that you can keep in touch. I do need to get this Galatians 2b restructured and put that up. I'll get that done shortly, because it's not a lot of days between now and then. So Wednesday, 6 o'clock for Galatians chapter 2b, and we'll go on from there. Okay. Any final questions or comments? 2:28 on my computer. What's that? Is it showing anything?
2 to 3 minutes.
Okay, about 3 minutes.
No. 2:25. Still 3.
3 minutes.
Okay.
Still 3.
All right, that's not bad. Okay. Any other final comments, questions, rebukes? Need to ask around and find out how we can get this delay down to a more reasonable period of time. All right. Okay, if nobody has anything else to add, thank you again for adding your comments as we go. That really makes it much more fun and interesting for me. All right, and I'll let you know as soon as I can find out, what's at issue for next week, as far as whether or not we can meet in person or we'll meet online. Okay, let's go ahead and close down for the day. God bless you guys. Thanks for coming. I'm going to leave it running for about another 3 minutes, just so we don't accidentally cut off the stream before it's all played out, because we got a 3-minute delay going. So, all right, shalom, and we'll see you Wednesday, God willing. Okay, that's all. Still going?
That's a while back.
Hmm?
Like, subscribe? Did you just do
Yeah.
That wasn't
earlier?
that far away.
That was just a couple minutes back.
Oh, I mean.
That's all right. You're focused on that.